Hello, everyone. My name is Ross Tangedal. I'm an assistant professor of English and director of the Cornerstone Press at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. This is course number 2 in our alumni engagement series on the Cornerstone Press and publishing here at the university. And today we're going to be talking about acquisitions, which is the way that we bring work into the press for students to work on and for writers to put out. So with that, I'll share my screen and we'll get going on course number 2. So the way that acquisitions works, acquisitions are part of a complex circuit, which this image here is adapted from Robert Darnton's communication circuit. So the way in which publishing sometimes is thought about is in a linear fashion. There is a writer who writes something, which is then brought to an editor or a publisher, which is then put out in book form to a reader. So it's linear. It goes from one side of the circuit to the other. What Darnton proposed, and what many of us now see to be the actual process of publishing, is that instead it's a complex circuit. There are many different pieces that go into the publishing industry. And so author to publisher, you see, goes back and forth. And that's the key. It's those arrows that go back and forth. That's editorial, that's production, that's everything. And then you look at all of these: printers, suppliers, shippers, booksellers, readers, purchasers, borrowers, clubs, libraries, which go back and forth with binders. Of course, books used to not come bound. You used to have to go out and hire someone to bind your books for you. But then in the center here, while they are not directly connected to any of these intellectual influences and publicity, economic and social conjuncture, and political and legal sanctions, all of those sort of, for Darnton, influence all of these different fields in different ways. And so what you see here then is this dotted line from the readers to the author, which the dotted line represents that they may not have a direct, readers may not have a direct line to the author or to the writer, but their thoughts about their work and the way in which they read the work of those writers does influence and get back to the author, which may influence what that writer writes for their next book or for their next story or poem or drama or what have you. So this wonderfully complex circuit, the communication circuit, will help us understand where we are in the publishing process with each of our series videos. So for acquisitions, actually, we're right here in the middle. And for a lot of our early videos, we're just in this in-between state between the author and the publisher. But remember, so much of what the author wrote is influenced by these 3 spheres here, and potentially also by this box here. And so while I would circle this space right now as where acquisitions comes in, because the publisher is now going to attempt to acquire a manuscript. By the way, manuscript is just a word for a piece that's been written but has not been turned into a book yet. So it's in a manuscript form to be developed and published as books. So today's class is all about acquisitions. How do we acquire books? So the key here is acquisitions is sort of about presenting oneself. If you're a writer, you're trying to get your work out there. Out there means published. So how does an author, a writer, go about doing that? Robert Frost, American poet, said the most creative thing in us is to believe in a thing. You do have to believe not only in yourself, but in the very industry that is books, if you plan on being a writer. A lot of people can write, but not a lot of people can publish a book. And that's the key. You have to turn the writing into something public. A book is a public piece. So Louise Gluck was an American poet who recently won the Nobel Prize. It seems to me that the desire to make art produces an ongoing experience of longing, a restlessness sometimes, but not inevitably, played out romantically or sexually. Always there seems something ahead, the next poem or story, visible at least, apprehensible, but unreachable. To perceive it at all is to be haunted by it. Some sound, some tone becomes a torment. The poem embodying that sound seems to exist somewhere already finished. It's like a lighthouse, except that as one swims toward it, it backs away. What I like about this very complex statement from Gluck is that the act of writing is difficult And the act of publishing is difficult because you're taking someone's writing, someone's art, someone's creativity, and trying to turn it into a saleable good that strangers will want to purchase and then read themselves and then analyze and think about and potentially recommend to other people. It does always seem like something is getting closer and then backing away, to use Gluck's term. That we always have this sense there's another book out there, another story out there, but how do we actually go about ascertaining that? And that's the key. It's the feeling that we have to have. Finally, Alice Munro, Canadian short story writer and also a Nobel laureate. A story is not like a road to follow. It's more like a house. I like this also for the connection back to the communication circuit, as opposed to it being kind of a linear road. It's more like a house. You go inside and you stay there for a while, wandering back and forth and settling where you like and discovering how the room and corridors relate to each other, how the world outside is altered by being viewed from these windows, and you, the visitor, the reader, are altered as well by being in this enclosed space, whether it is ample and easy or full of crooked turns or sparsely or opulently furnished. You can go back again and again, and the house, the story, always contains more than you saw the first time or the last time. It also has a sturdy sense of itself, of being built out of its own necessity, not just to shelter or beguile you. Alice Munro is a wonderful writer, and I love the structure of this quote. I love the way that she's discussing how something that is intricately put together and placed into a specific form is meant to be what it is. And she does that because she's a short story writer. She's never written a novel. So many wonder, why hasn't Alice Munro written a novel or a long work? Her stories are constructed a specific way to live within the genre that they are. And I think what's interesting about this is all of these are about presenting yourself and presenting the work. How does one present oneself to a publishing house and say, I want my work to be published and I think my work has value. Here's why. So let's see what people do. So Jane Friedman recommends that query letters or cover letters include these 4 elements. And I took this from janefriedman.com. She does a lot of work in editorial and production. And there's 4 elements of every query letter, which I find really fascinating. And I share these with my students a lot as we're vetting manuscripts. So students help myself and our executive editor and our development coordinator vet manuscripts. And we look at different ways that these writers are developing their ideas. What are their pedigrees? How many books have they published? Are they new writers? Are they older writers? What is it about them that we think is interesting? And more importantly, how would they potentially fit into the press, whether it's a specific series or what other books we're publishing currently would they fit in with? Because that's really important as you're developing the brand that is the Cornerstone Press. So every query letter comes with the manuscript. So a query letter is an introduction. Who are you? What do you do? Why? It comes with your manuscript, which is your creative work. And those 2 things together are the important part of the manuscript submission process that the Cornerstone Press deals with. So first in your query letter is the housekeeping, your book's genre, category, word count, title, subtitle, the business of things, the meat of the matter. And then the hook, describe that story. What's the most critical query element? 150 to 300 words is sufficient. By the way, shorter is better. Less is more. 2 or 3 page query letters, it ain't gonna work. Less than a page at best. A quick bio note, who are you? Learn how to write about yourself within 50 to 100 words, which for a lot of people is very difficult, present company included. It's hard to put your professional bio into a really tight circle, but you do have to learn how to do it because you want to have the best stuff in there, but you want people to remember you. And then finally, a quick thank you and a closing. So this is from Jane Friedman. In its entirety, the query letter shouldn't run more than a page, single-spaced, if printed, or somewhere around 200 to 450 words. I recommend brevity, especially if you lack confidence. Brevity gets you in less trouble. The more you try to explain, the more you'll squeeze the life out of your story. So get in, get out. That is really excellent advice. Don't oversell. Just make sure you set yourself up so they know who you are, what you're doing, and what you hope to have the work do. Clean, efficient, professional is always more effective than using a ton of adjectives and being really flowery and lyrical. Just strip it down, keep it simple, get it out. And I use that with a lot of my students and with a lot of my clients, and they find that to be really useful. And I agree. So I'm not going to read these examples in their entirety, but these are just examples of good cover letters that we've received from books that we're going to be publishing. So I'm going to move myself around here. There we go. So look, this is for our collection Township, which is coming out in the fall by an excellent writer. I'm writing to my short story collection Township. So Friedman said you got to set yourself up in the beginning, right? The housekeeping. Here's the collection. Appreciates the way the Cornerstone publications have contributed to more complex up. It looks like our writer understands who the press is, what the press does. It's always a good move. And also where their stories fit in. Love it. Midwestern migrant Appalachian, got some stories to tell. Awesome. What is Township? The book. We have a nice setup here. A nice summary of the book. In a tight package, well, three long sentences, and we're in and out. And then finally, where have some of the stories been published before? This goes as part of your bio. Sort of what is your pedigree? What have you done? Have you gotten work published elsewhere? Because that always helps. And then finally, who are you and what do you do? I'm alumni of Kenyon College, Fordham University, Ohio State, all the different editorial work that she's done, what awards or fiction prizes she's won, and then of course who she is and what she does. This is a great cover letter. Also letting you know that you've attached stuff. Hey, I've got all my things here. I appreciate your attention. Look forward to hearing from you. This is a professional business letter because that's what this is, folks. Publishing is a business. It's not just art, it's business as well. And the second example, oops, I think I did that. I think I did one example already. Well, I had two examples on there, and the second example was just as good as the first. But the key there is that we at the press receive a ton of subpar, query letters and manuscripts, because that just happens, folks. You don't always get home runs from everybody. Sometimes you have to wade through either mediocre work, mediocre query letters, and sometimes just really bad stuff. But through all that, you get excellent work, promising work that has the potential to be a good part of the press's lineage. And so those letters are good examples of that. So reading a story or poem or two, if I'm an acquiring editor, and I've got my student staff that help me, I've got myself and others, first position is important. Open with your best story, your best poem, your best essay. The acquisitions team does not have the time to read entire manuscripts. We just don't. So we make decisions based on first impressions and gut instincts. Put your best foot forward. Your cover, query letter, and all elements must be strong and professional. You've got to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. I tell people all the time, put your best story or poem in the beginning. Hit them right away. Then that's that initial gut punch that boom, I'm serious, boom, it's good, and I'm ready to go. If the first few pieces are strong, there's a good chance that manuscript gets picked up if you continue to read through. However, when evaluating manuscripts, the editors also look at the direction the press is taking. We have passed on strong work because it does not fit with our press's trajectory, and that's the truth. I've got to turn down a lot of novel manuscripts because currently we're not acquiring novels. Everybody wants to publish novels, but we have kind of currently made a conscious decision that we're not going to be publishing novels. So good work gets rejected all the time. That's also important to know. Just because a rejection has been sent doesn't mean that work is not worthwhile. It mostly has to do with fit. It's up to the discerning eyes and hearts of the acquisitions team to forecast, along with the publisher, where we see the press heading and whether or not the manuscript under consideration belongs on that path with us. Books have to move us. The manuscript has to move us. If it doesn't move us, we don't print it. I think that's really important. If it doesn't move us, we don't develop it any further. So, do we want to work with you? Do you want to work with us? This is a very important part of acquisitions. Believe it or not, this tongue firmly in cheek, not every writer wants to work with the student staff publishing house. Our students are editors, designers, marketers, salespeople, and administrators. It takes a special writer to agree to work with rather than against students. We do not want adversarial relationships. Our students deserve the best, and they deserve writers that want to work with them. And all of the writers we've had thus far love working with our professional student staff. And also your public profile matters. We want only the best writers in their work. And sometimes that means passing on writers who just do not possess the willingness to work with a diverse mix of young professionals. I always tell my students that they're not students, they're professionals, and they're going to be treated as professionals and seen as professionals. And that's really important because that's what they're doing. They're doing the work of the business of the press. So believe me, you can tell really quickly who plays well with others and who doesn't based on their materials. And that's just part of the game. So all of those things go into acquisitions. What will this do for the writer in question? Will this book be a big deal for them? If it is, we really want to be part of that. If it's just going to be, if they publish 3 books a year, where will we fall? It feels like sometimes that we wouldn't be seen as that important. And so Acquisitions is kind of a gut feeling move. It's kind of a make sure the writer is putting their best foot forward move. But in the end, it's about instinct. Is this going to be a good book? Can we see our students working with this writer and developing this book further? Do we believe in this writer? Do we believe in this book? And if we do, we're going to send a contract to that writer and say, we'd like to publish your book. So that's how acquisitions works at the university, for the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point's Cornerstone Press. Next time, we're going to get down into more of the dirty parts of editing, content copy and styling and stuff like that. We'll look at a couple more case studies of famous writers and editors, and we'll go from there. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you at our next meeting. Bye.